The chandeliers of the Harrington Hotel glimmered like captured stars, each crystal reflecting the weight of old money. Waiters moved in seamless rhythm, balancing trays of champagne that never emptied. The air was thick with the perfume of power, money disguised as elegance, arrogance dressed in silk. Every conversation began with a surname and ended with a boast. Tonight wasn't just another social event. It was the annual Harrington Investors Gala, where the wealthy came not to celebrate but to measure each other's worth in whispers and glances. At the center of it all stood Sterling Grant III, the man whose smile could sell a lie as easily as a promise. His family's fortune had built towers that touched clouds, but his ego built walls no one dared to climb. He stood beneath the chandelier like it existed for him alone, surrounded by board members and financiers desperate to be seen in his orbit. His voice carried the easy arrogance of someone who believed the city itself was a family heirloom. The Grant name was gold-plated history, and tonight he was hosting an exclusive celebration for a $68 billion expansion fund. Every guest had been handpicked, every face familiar, every name approved, until two unfamiliar figures stepped through the golden doors. The room's rhythm shifted, subtly, but enough for heads to turn. A black couple walked in, calm, composed, dressed in quiet confidence. The man's tuxedo fit like armor. The woman's ivory gown flowed as though it had its own language. They didn't need to announce themselves. Their presence did it for them. And that was enough to make the air uncomfortable. A ripple spread through the crowd, soft at first. Someone near the grand piano leaned toward another guest and whispered, "Who invited them?" Eyes darted, smiles tightened. Conversations faltered mid-laugh. In places like the Harrington, new faces were noticed, but black faces were dissected. The couple moved further into the hall, unfazed by the murmurs. The man adjusted his cufflinks with unbothered grace, and his wife met each sideways glance with a composure that silenced curiosity better than words ever could. Sterling noticed them too. His gaze sharpened like a man who just spotted a fly land on his champagne glass. He wasn't used to surprises, especially not ones he didn't control. The murmur grew into a quiet current of discomfort that rolled beneath the polished laughter. Guests leaned closer, lowering their voices as though bigotry required subtlety to feel refined. Then came Chloe Grant, Sterling's daughter. Blonde hair, red lipstick, and entitlement polished to perfection. She held her phone up, already live streaming because humiliation had become her version of entertainment. "Oh, this is gold," she whispered to her companion, panning the camera toward the newcomers. "Look who decided to crash our floor tonight." The screen's glow reflected in her grin as she aimed the lens at the black couple. "Don't they look out of place?" she added, laughter dripping between the words. Comments poured in instantly. Phones tilted across the room as guests watched her feed instead of their glasses. Laughter followed. The woman in ivory didn't flinch. She adjusted the strap of her gown, standing taller, as if the room itself had to rise to meet her. The waiter serving champagne hesitated when he reached them, uncertain whether they were guests or staff. Sterling's smirk returned. The kind that said, "You don't belong here, and I'll enjoy proving it." He clinked his glass for attention. The sound cut through the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his tone dripping with charm and challenge. "It's good to see familiar faces and a few surprises." The guests chuckled obediently. Sterling's eyes locked on the couple, his smile never wavering, though his meaning was clear. The man met his gaze calmly. The kind of calm that isn't silence, it's power in disguise. And for the first time that evening, Sterling's confidence flickered. If this opening already has you hooked, make sure to subscribe to Echoes of Hope Stories HQ for more true stories that expose what arrogance tries to hide. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your country might have halls like this too, where wealth wears politeness and prejudice wears pearls. Back at the gala, laughter rose again, forced this time. Sterling lifted his glass higher, ready to turn their presence into a spectacle. Guests leaned forward, eager for entertainment. But no one in that golden room knew the truth about the couple standing before them. Not yet. And before the night was over, Sterling Grant would wish he'd never opened his mouth. Sterling Grant thrived on eyes. He needed them the way others needed air. The chandeliers above cast a halo over his smug grin as he raised his voice loud enough to echo across the marble hall. "So," he began, turning toward the black couple as though addressing a curiosity rather than people, "I don't believe we've met. You must be part of the event staff?" The laughter came too easily, polished and obedient. The kind of laugh people give when they know they're laughing at something wrong, but fear being the only ones who don't. Darius didn't answer. He stood with the stillness of a man who'd long learned that responding to arrogance gives it oxygen. Alana's gaze met Sterling's briefly, steady, neither timid nor defiant. Just aware. It was that quiet awareness that made Sterling shift slightly, uncomfortable in his own performance. Chloe's phone was still raised. The live chat scrolled faster now, mocking emojis, cheap jokes, people typing words they'd never dare say out loud. "Oh, my viewers love this," she said loudly, voice sweet and sharp. "They think she looks stunning for a charity event. Not quite gala level, but points for effort." Another burst of laughter. The kind that didn't sound human anymore. It sounded hungry. A waiter approached with a tray of champagne, then froze mid-step, unsure whether to offer a glass to Darius. He looked at Sterling for silent instruction. Sterling gave a small, dismissive wave. The waiter turned away. The message was clear. They weren't guests. Murmurs rippled across the tables like wind through dry leaves. Every whisper became a judgment. Who invited them? Maybe they wandered in. They should know better. And yet, as each insult landed, Darius remained composed. His posture didn't shift. His eyes didn't drop. It was the kind of composure that disarmed cruelty, because arrogance feeds on reaction, and he refused to give it one. Sterling lifted his glass again, pretending it was all in jest. "Relax, everyone," he said, smiling to the crowd. "I'm only teasing. We welcome everyone here, no matter their background." The room laughed again, louder, meaner, because they understood the word he didn't say. Chloe zoomed her phone in on Alana's face, tilting the camera for the perfect shot. "Smile for the audience," she said mockingly. "They're loving this. You're practically famous now." Alana didn't blink. Her voice, when it finally came, was soft but firm. "Then let them see what grace looks like." The room went still for a moment, the kind of stillness that makes people realize they've gone too far, but are too proud to admit it. Chloe's smirk faltered. Sterling, irritated by the pause, forced another laugh to reclaim control. "Grace is admirable," he said, "but some rooms are simply too refined to borrow it." Another round of laughter followed, thinner now, uncertain. Racism doesn't always wear slurs and anger. Sometimes it wears designer suits and toasts cruelty with champagne. It doesn't whisper anymore, it streams live for applause. At the far end of the ballroom, two men exchanged uneasy glances. One leaned closer to the other, whispering, "Do you know who they are?" The question floated through the room like a spark no one saw coming. Chloe read another comment aloud from her phone, laughing through it. But her laughter didn't reach her eyes. There was a new word appearing too often in the chat, one that made her throat tighten. "Cole." She didn't recognize it yet, but others did. A few guests glanced down at their screens, their smiles fading. Phones were being unlocked, searches typed hurriedly, brows furrowing as realization began to surface. Darius took Alana's hand gently and turned toward the piano, as if the noise around them didn't exist. Their silence wasn't surrender, it was power waiting for its turn to speak. And before the night was over, that silence would speak louder than every laugh in the room. The orchestra's melody swelled behind Sterling's voice, but his words carried louder than any instrument. He tapped his glass again, commanding attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "tonight isn't just a celebration of profit, it's a tribute to heritage, to families that built this city from dust and discipline." Applause followed, obedient but hollow. He continued, glancing deliberately toward Darius and Alana. "Some say wealth is earned," he smirked, "but true legacy, well, that's in the blood." It was the kind of statement that wrapped prejudice in poetry. Guests laughed politely, though not all shared his ease. Some looked away, uncomfortable. Others turned toward their phones, half to escape the tension, half out of curiosity. The couple still hadn't moved. Darius stood motionless, his shoulders squared like marble against the sting of arrogance. Alana's gaze swept the room once, unreadable. Near the back of the hall, a man scrolled through his phone, frowning. "Wait a second," he whispered to his companion. Coal Dynamics, that's them. His friend blinked. The energy company? The one that just signed that billion-dollar infrastructure deal with the federal government. Their eyes widened. They're that coal? Whispers began to branch across the ballroom like cracks on glass. Discreet at first, then growing. Screens lit under tables, quick searches filling the silence between Sterling's sentences. The laughter softened, the applause dimmed. It didn't take long before recognition spread. The couple Sterling mocked weren't just attendees, they were founders of one of the most powerful clean energy firms in the world. Coal Dynamics Incorporated, a Black-owned empire changing how cities powered themselves. 10 years earlier, the Coals had started in a cramped rented basement in Atlanta, with one computer, 2 desks, and a dream nobody took seriously. When banks refused them funding, they pooled savings, built prototypes by hand, and pitched to investors who barely looked them in the eye. The same people who ignored them then now bought their energy contracts by the billions. Their innovations had cut costs nationwide and driven major industries toward sustainability. They weren't just participants in the energy revolution, they led it. And Sterling Grant, self-proclaimed heir of progress, was unknowingly trying to humiliate the very people his corporation was begging to merge with. Across the room, the CFO of Grant Global sat frozen. He recognized the name instantly. His phone buzzed with a message from their legal department. Coal Dynamics has final say on contract terms. We cannot afford tension. He looked up, face pale. Sterling, oblivious, kept talking. Heritage, he declared, cannot be bought. It's something refined over generations. Money alone doesn't grant you a seat at this table. A few guests exchanged nervous glances. One whispered, maybe someone should stop him. Another replied, not yet, let him finish digging. Chloe's live stream, once filled with cruel laughter, now pulsed with confusion. Her comment feed shifted rapidly. Wait, is that Darius Cole? They own Coal Dynamics. Oh my God, he's their partner. The tone online flipped. Mockery turned to shock, then outrage. Clips of Sterling's toast were already being recorded and reshared in real time. Racism never checks the resume of the person it looks down on. It assumes the skin tells the story, and that assumption builds its own downfall. At the edge of the ballroom, Alana gently touched her husband's arm. No words, just quiet reassurance. They knew exactly what was unfolding. The truth didn't need defense, it only needed time. The whispers grew louder now. Faces once painted with amusement turned to unease. A few tried to slip their phones away, pretending ignorance. Others simply stared, realizing how fast arrogance can turn into embarrassment. Sterling lifted his glass again, unaware that his empire's future was unraveling faster than the bubbles rising in his champagne. He thought he was entertaining a room. He was, in fact, exposing himself to the world. The orchestra dimmed to a polite murmur as Sterling lifted his crystal glass once more. His grin stretched wide, confident that every soul in the room was still orbiting his charm. To true builders of legacy, he declared, voice booming against the marble. To those whose names are carved in stone, not printed on temporary plaques. Tonight, we honor the bloodlines that built this city brick by brick. Applause followed, but thinner now, hesitant, like air forced through tight throats. Guests clapped not because they believed in his words, but because silence might cost them proximity to power. Sterling basked in it anyway. He thrived on validation, even when it was reluctant. He turned toward Darius and Alana again, glass raised slightly higher, his smile curving into something sharp. And of course, he added, we welcome new faces. It takes courage to step into rooms that history didn't design for you. A few uneasy chuckles echoed. Someone shifted in their chair, another cleared their throat. The tension was now heavy enough to taste. Alana's fingers brushed the edge of her champagne flute. Her expression didn't flicker. Darius's jaw was set, not tight, not trembling, just measured. The stillness of a man who'd watched arrogance perform this act too many times before. Sterling mistook that composure for submission. He turned back to his crowd. To legacy, he repeated smugly, may it remain in the right hands. That was when Darius spoke. His voice didn't rise to compete, it cut through the noise because of its calm. Each word landed with quiet authority that demanded stillness. We didn't come to borrow legacy, he said, his tone even, unhurried. We came to fund the future. The words hung in the air like the drop before thunder. The orchestra paused. Laughter stopped mid-breath. Even the waiters froze. Sterling blinked, thrown off by the audacity, or perhaps by the realization that audacity didn't need volume. He forced a laugh, brittle and loud. "Fund the future?" he repeated mockingly. "My friend, I admire ambition, but the future is expensive, and history doesn't accept loans." He looked around, expecting laughter to follow his lead again, but this time only a few joined him. The rest stared at their screens. Chloe's smirk faltered as her phone began vibrating relentlessly. Her comment feed was exploding. Messages poured in faster than she could read them. "That's Darius Cole. He owns Cole Dynamics. They're billionaires, not guests. Your dad's company is begging for their partnership." Her laughter stuttered. "What? No." She refreshed her feed, reading more comments. Her eyes widened. "Wait, what are they talking about?" Across the room, heads lowered to glowing screens. Recognition spread in real time. A few gasps rippled quietly through the hall. Someone near the bar whispered, "Oh my God, he's funding Grant Global's expansion." Sterling's smile froze mid-expression. He looked around, confused by the sudden silence and the shifting eyes. "What's all this?" he demanded softly, forcing another chuckle. Phones flashed under tables. Screens glowed brighter than the chandeliers. Guests weren't laughing anymore. They were scrolling, whispering, realizing ignorance always looks invincible until the Wi-Fi connects. Sterling's daughter stepped closer, whispering frantically, "Dad, it's trending." He turned sharply, voice low. "What's trending?" She hesitated. "You are, and so are they." He frowned, pulling out his own phone, the glow of the screen illuminating the cracks in his confidence. His name and theirs appeared side by side, his arrogance now a public headline. Around them, the same guests who'd laughed minutes earlier began to retreat. Some pretended to take calls, others simply walked away. Loyalty dissolving in real time. Darius didn't gloat. He simply placed his untouched glass on the nearest tray and looked Sterling in the eye. "Legacy isn't inherited," he said quietly. "It's built. And sometimes it rebuilds without asking permission." The orchestra resumed softly, as though trying to drown the weight of the moment. But no music could hide what had shifted. For the first time all evening, Sterling Grant wasn't the man commanding the room. He was the man being studied, under 1,000 screens by 1,000 eyes, all watching the empire of entitlement begin to tremble. A sharp chime from a phone broke the silence, then another. Dozens of screens glowed across the ballroom like a constellation of curiosity. Guests who once laughed now scrolled with widening eyes. Sterling noticed it, irritation creeping into his voice. "Can we not have one evening without everyone glued to their devices?" He snapped, his laugh thin and forced. But the current of unease had already taken over the room. Chloe's eyes darted to her screen again. "Dad," she whispered, voice unsteady. "You need to see this." Sterling waved her off, still pretending control. "Whatever gossip they're sharing can wait until..." Then a man's voice from the corner cut in. "It's not gossip," he said, rising from his chair. "It's the Wall Street Ledger. They just dropped a breaking headline." The words spread faster than the music could fill the air. Phones refreshed and screens lit up with the same headline in bold print. Grant Global's new $68 billion expansion fund, majority funded by Cole Dynamics LLC. The room froze. Every head turned toward the couple Sterling had just mocked. Darius didn't move. He simply slipped one hand into his pocket, calm as ever. His assistant, a young man in a charcoal suit, approached quietly through the stunned crowd, holding a leather folder. No one dared to stop him. He reached the center of the room and handed the folder to Sterling. "For Mr. Cole, sir," he said politely before stepping back. Sterling took it with an annoyed grunt, flipping it open as if to dismiss the gesture. But the first page made him blink, then blink again. Cole Dynamics, LLC, lead investor. Controlling interest, 52%. Board rights, pending activation. His fingers trembled. This can't be right," he muttered under his breath. "Who approved this?" His CFO shifted uncomfortably near the buffet table. "You did, sir," he whispered. "You signed it 3 weeks ago." A murmur rippled through the ballroom. Someone gasped quietly. The orchestra had stopped playing completely now. Every violinist frozen mid-note, every conversation dead in the air. Chloe looked between her father and the Coles, her face pale. "Wait, you mean..." She stopped mid-sentence, realization dawning. You mean they? Darius's gaze met hers, calm and measured. Own a controlling stake in your father's company? Yes. The silence that followed was heavier than any insult that had filled the room before. The crowd's laughter from earlier now felt obscene, echoing faintly in their minds like a bad memory. Sterling tried to speak but found no words. His mouth opened, then closed again, soundless. The confident host, the billionaire heir who mocked others for lacking heritage, was speechless before the very people he deemed unworthy of standing beside him. Across the ballroom, a few guests began clapping, not mockery this time, but genuine respect. The sound started slow, unsure, then grew until it filled the hall. It wasn't a standing ovation for wealth, it was for grace. Alana inclined her head slightly, acknowledging them, then turned back to Sterling. You wanted legacy, she said softly. You just sold it to us. Her words landed like a final note. Clean. Unapologetic. Chloe's phone buzzed again in her trembling hand. Her live stream had turned against her. Comments flooded in, merciless now. How's it feel to laugh at your investors? Guess money talks louder than arrogance. They didn't need your approval. They already own you. Chloe's lips parted, but she had nothing to say. Power has a strange way of changing hands, quietly, then all at once. Sometimes it doesn't roar, it simply stands there, calm, dignified, and lets the truth do the talking. Sterling set the folder down on the nearest table, hands trembling as reality settled in. Around him, the empire of his arrogance began to crack. Not with noise, but with realization. Every eye that once adored him now watched with the same curiosity reserved for fallen kings. And at the center of it all, Darius and Alana Cole stood as they had from the beginning, silent, steady, and unbothered. They hadn't come to fit into Sterling's world. They had come to quietly buy it. By midnight, the gala that was meant to crown Sterling Grant's legacy had become the internet's favorite scandal. Clips from Chloe's livestream flooded every platform, his smirk, his speech about bloodlines, the laughter, and finally, Darius's quiet words that silenced the room. The hashtag "the gala that backfired" shot to #1 before the orchestra had even packed up. Across social media, the narrative flipped. Side-by-side comparisons appeared. Sterling's sneer versus Alana's calm poise. Commentators called it the moment arrogance met accountability. Even the late-night talk shows ran with it, each playing the same 6-second clip of Sterling raising his glass right before his empire began to collapse. Grant Global's public relations team worked through the night, firing off panicked emails marked urgent. Damage control. One executive tried to spin the situation as a misunderstanding taken out of context, but context was exactly what the world had watched, in high definition and real time. At 2 a.m., board members began calling one another in disbelief. Screenshots of the investment documents circulated across private investor chats. The revelation that Coal Dynamics LLC owned a controlling share hit like a shockwave in the finance world. How could he not know? One investor messaged. Another replied, because he never thought people like them could own anything he'd need. By morning, his legacy was a meme, and their grace was a movement. Outside the Harrington Hotel, reporters lined the pavement, microphones raised, waiting for a glimpse of the fallen titan. Headlines screamed across morning broadcasts. Billionaire humiliates his own investors. From host to headline, Sterling Grant's gala disaster. Black couples silenced the room without saying a word. Inside, the ballroom staff worked quietly, clearing glasses and gathering the remnants of what was supposed to be a historic night. The chandeliers still sparkled, but the glamour had soured. Guests moved like ghosts, avoiding one another's eyes, pretending they hadn't laughed hours earlier. Sterling sat alone at the head table, his phone buzzing non-stop. News outlets wanted statements. Investors wanted explanations. His father's portrait stared down from the wall behind him, a man who once said, "Never let outsiders handle your fortune." Sterling had built his arrogance on that belief. And now it had swallowed him whole. Chloe tried to approach him, eyes red, voice trembling. "Dad, I didn't know." "Enough," he snapped, though the edge in his tone was gone. He sounded tired, like a man trying to convince himself the night hadn't happened. "Delete the video," he ordered. "It's everywhere," she whispered. "Even if I take mine down, 1,000 others already have it." Across the lobby, Darius and Alana exited quietly, hand in hand. No entourage, no security detail, no need for spectacle. The same guests who had sneered at their arrival now stood aside, heads lowered. Some murmured apologies they didn't have the courage to say aloud. As they passed a young waiter who had hesitated to serve them earlier, Alana paused. She smiled softly and said, "Thank you for working tonight. It couldn't have been easy." The young man nodded, shame clouding his eyes. Her kindness disarmed him more than any confrontation could have. Outside, flashes erupted from cameras, but neither she nor Darius acknowledged them. They entered their car quietly, the door closing on the noise of a crumbling empire behind them. Back inside, Sterling's PR chief handed him a printed headline fresh off the wire. Coal Dynamics confirms ownership stake in Grant Global. No comment on gala incident. He read it twice before setting it down. For the first time in his life, silence followed him. Racism feeds on ignorance until the truth pulls the curtain back. And when it does, arrogance never looks powerful, it looks small. By dawn, one image dominated every feed. Darius and Alana walking calmly through the hotel doors. Heads high, faces unbothered. They hadn't shouted, they hadn't demanded apology. They had simply left with everything that mattered: dignity, ownership, and the world finally watching them with respect. The morning after the gala, the skyline above Grant Global's headquarters looked washed out and gray. Inside the 47th floor boardroom, silence clung to the air like smoke. Every executive who'd clapped for Sterling the night before now avoided his eyes. The company's logo shimmered faintly on the glass wall, its brightness mocking the tension that filled the room. Sterling sat at the head of the long mahogany table, unshaven, eyes heavy. A dozen phones buzzed in unison, notifications stacking one after another. Breaking news segments, shareholder alerts, and most painfully, the overnight collapse of investor confidence. Coal Dynamics had issued a single, unembellished statement at dawn. "We are withdrawing from all pending expansion discussions with Grant Global, effective immediately. Our commitment to sustainable partnership does not extend to environments of public humiliation." That one paragraph cost Sterling's company nearly $9 billion in projected value within 2 hours. The CFO cleared his throat, voice thin. "We're receiving calls from Zurich and Tokyo. 2 major investors have already pulled their capital from the fund. The rest want guarantees we can't give." Sterling rubbed his temples. "We can fix this. We'll issue an apology, say the footage was misinterpreted." "Misinterpreted?" Another board member snapped, shoving a tablet across the table. "Half the country saw you insult the very people funding us, Sterling. That's not a misunderstanding. That's arrogance with a microphone." The outburst hung in the air, shocking even the speaker himself. No one had ever spoken to Sterling that way in his own boardroom. The communications director leaned forward carefully. "The Coals are being hailed as symbols of grace under fire. Every outlet is calling them the future of ethical leadership. They're scheduled for an interview with the Wall Street Journal tomorrow. You, on the other hand, are trending for all the wrong reasons." Sterling slammed his hand on the table. "They embarrassed me in my own room." The CFO replied quietly, "No, Sterling, you embarrassed yourself." They just stood there. A long pause followed. Then, as if planned by fate, a red notification light blinked on the conference screen. "Live feed request, Business Network News." Sterling forced a smile and gestured for it to play. The broadcast flickered on, revealing the network's anchor sitting across from the company's chief financial officer. The lower caption read, "Grant Global Fallout, Insider Speaks." The CFO on screen adjusted his glasses and exhaled. "Effective immediately," he said. "I'm resigning from Grant Global due to ethical incompatibility with current leadership. This company can't build the future if it refuses to respect the people funding it." The room fell dead silent. Sterling's jaw slackened. His CFO, his most loyal ally, had just quit on live television. Within minutes, stock alerts started flashing red on every phone. Grant Global's shares were in freefall. Chloe entered the boardroom timidly, sunglasses hiding her swollen eyes. Her phone was still buzzing, notifications rolling in like a storm. "Dad," she whispered, "all my brand partnerships just dropped me. They said they can't associate with the video. Even my influencer agency terminated my contract." Sterling turned his gaze toward the glass wall, where the city stretched endlessly below. "We'll recover," he muttered, but even he didn't sound convinced. Injustice always thinks it's protected by walls, until those walls turn to mirrors. And in that reflection, power finally sees what it looks like to everyone else. Emails pinged, legal teams panicked, the PR department scrambled to draft a public apology, though every draft sounded hollow. Across the table, a younger executive whispered, "Coal Dynamics doesn't need us anymore. They've already been approached by 3 of our competitors." Sterling looked up sharply. They wouldn't dare. But they would, and they already had. Outside the boardroom's glass walls, employees moved in nervous silence, pretending not to see their boss's empire collapsing behind the tinted glass. By noon, the company's stock had dropped another 6%. By afternoon, the press was calling it the swiftest reputational downfall of the decade. And by evening, even Sterling's allies had stopped answering his calls. He leaned back in his chair, eyes dull, the morning sunlight now fading into shadow. The irony was complete. The man who had mocked others for lacking legacy now sat surrounded by the ruins of his own. The morning sun spilled across Alana's kitchen table, painting streaks of gold over a half-read newspaper. The headline on the front page read, "The Woman Who Rewrote the Gala." Her phone buzzed non-stop. Journalists wanted interviews, TV anchors wanted her opinion, stylists wanted to dress her for talk shows. But Alana ignored all of it. She sat quietly, sipping her tea, still wearing the same calm expression she'd worn the night before. The world might have erupted around her, but she hadn't changed. Grace didn't need an audience, it just needed consistency. Then her phone rang again. This time the caller ID wasn't a journalist or a corporate contact. It was an unfamiliar number. She hesitated, then answered. A small, nervous voice spoke on the other end. "Mrs. Cole?" "Yes, dear," Alana said softly. The girl paused, her breath shaky. "I saw the video online," she whispered. "The one from the gala. You didn't yell back. You didn't cry. You just stood there. I didn't know we could walk in rooms like that." Alana smiled faintly, her throat tightening with emotion. "What's your name?" she asked. "Amira," the girl said. "I'm 16. I want to be an architect one day, but sometimes I don't even apply for the summer programs because I feel like I don't belong." Alana's voice was gentle but firm. "You belong in every room your dreams can reach, Amira. Never let someone's discomfort convince you you're out of place." The line went quiet for a second before the girl whispered, "Thank you." Then the call ended. Alana sat there for a long time, staring at the phone, the weight of that moment pressing deeper than any headline could. The night that was meant to humiliate her had become something else entirely. A mirror for every young girl who'd ever been told to shrink in spaces built for others. Within hours, screenshots of the call's transcript shared anonymously by the girl spread online. Comments flooded beneath it. She didn't just stand in that room, she changed it. Grace is power in heels. Alana Cole, the elegance that dismantled arrogance. Major magazines picked up the story. Vogue called her the woman who redefined modern strength. Forbes listed her under Voices of Leadership when poise becomes power. But for Alana, the attention was never the goal. She turned down interviews that wanted to dramatize the incident. If they want a spectacle, she told Darius, they already had one. What will give them now is purpose. She launched a quiet initiative through Coal Dynamics, the Open Door Scholarship Fund, dedicated to supporting young Black and minority students pursuing careers in leadership, engineering, and clean energy. The first donation came anonymously, but everyone knew whose signature it carried. Darius watched her from across the living room that evening, pride flickering behind his calm demeanor. "You turned a wound into a window," he said. Alana smiled faintly. "No," she replied. "I just refused to let them close it." Sometimes revolution wears heels and refuses to flinch. It doesn't need a microphone or a march. It just needs a moment when dignity stands taller than hate. By the end of the week, the gala that backfired had evolved into a different movement. Women from across the world, executives, students, mothers, posted photos under the tag, captioned with stories of the rooms they once feared entering. Boardrooms, conferences, classrooms. Alana didn't repost or comment. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke louder than speeches. Reporters tried to provoke her into a statement about Sterling Grant, but she declined every invitation. "I wish him peace," she said simply, "because peace is the one thing arrogance can't afford." And just like that, she reminded the world that dignity isn't weakness, it's a weapon. The same grace that Sterling mistook for fragility had become the movement that dismantled his empire. And as the sun dipped behind the city's skyline, Alana closed her laptop, folded her hands, and whispered to herself, "Let them remember not the insult, but the composure that ended it." The lobby of Grant Global was a war zone of flashing cameras and shouting reporters. Sterling stepped through the revolving glass doors, flanked by 2 security guards who looked more uncomfortable than protective. Questions hit him from every direction like hail on metal. "Mr. Grant, do you regret your remarks at the gala? Did you know Cole Dynamics owned controlling shares in your company? Is it true half your investors have withdrawn?" He didn't answer. His once perfectly tailored suit now looked heavy, like it no longer belonged to him. The cameras followed as he forced a strained smile that fooled no one. His silence was clipped and rehearsed, but every step he took screamed defeat. Inside the building, executives avoided eye contact. His name, once synonymous with dominance, had become a liability. A week after the gala, 8 major corporations had canceled partnerships, citing ethical incompatibility. Banks halted future loans. Charities removed his family name from donor walls. What had taken generations to build was collapsing faster than his PR team could draft apologies. Cole Dynamics moved quietly in the background. While headlines obsessed over the scandal, their legal team was buying. Slowly, discreetly, they acquired Sterling's remaining shares, purchased through holding companies until the numbers shifted. Within days, Darius Cole became the majority stakeholder of Grant Global. He mocked the hands that fed his fortune. Now those hands signed his retirement. When Sterling finally returned to his office, the company's crest above the door had been replaced with a new design. Same symbol, but now accompanied by a second name, Grant Cole Energy Group. He stopped in the hallway, staring at it. For the first time in his life, he was a guest in a building he'd once ruled. His assistant approached cautiously. "There's a press statement waiting for your approval, sir." He didn't take it. "Whose logo is this?" he asked quietly, pointing toward the plaque. "Yours, sir, and the new board's." He turned away before she could see his expression. In the conference room, the seats were filled, but not by the faces he expected. Investors from Cole Dynamics sat across the table, calm, professional, and completely unbothered. The man at the head of the table wasn't him anymore. It was Darius Cole. Sterling hesitated at the doorway, unsure whether to enter. Darius glanced up briefly, acknowledging him with a polite nod. "Good morning, Mr. Grant. Please, take a seat if you'd like to observe." The phrase cut deeper than any insult could have. Observe. He'd gone from leader to bystander in his own empire. The meeting lasted less than an hour. Terms were signed. Leadership transferred. A press release was drafted and approved, without his input. Chloe watched it all unfold from the corner of the room, face pale and distant. The daughter who once flaunted family privilege online had become a cautionary tale. Her public apology, posted hours earlier, was meant to rebuild sympathy, but it only poured fuel on the fire. "My actions do not reflect the values of our family," she'd written. "I now understand that privilege without empathy is ignorance." The internet wasn't impressed. Comment sections filled with scorn. Now she learns? Apology after exposure isn't humility, it's damage control. By evening, Chloe deleted all her accounts. Sterling stayed in the boardroom long after everyone else left. Papers lay scattered before him. Contracts, statements, and the new letterhead freshly printed. Grant Cole Energy Group, signed Darius M. Cole, Executive Chairman. He stared at the signature for a long time. Each letter was precise, confident, final. Outside the glass wall, the skyline reflected in the window, the same skyline his father had once claimed their family built. Now, it belonged, in part, to the man he'd tried to humiliate. Arrogance always believes it owns tomorrow, but tomorrow belongs to the ones who build it, not the ones who guard it. Sterling leaned back in his chair, eyes dim. The empire was still standing, but he no longer had the keys. He had mocked a man for stepping into his world, not realizing that world was already his. And now, the only name printed above his own was the one he had underestimated most. 1 year later, the chandeliers of the Harrington Hotel shimmered again. The same ballroom, the same marble floors. But the tone had changed. Gone was the smug laughter of inherited privilege. Tonight, The air carried purpose. The invitation read in gold print, "Legacy isn't inherited, it's built." At the entrance stood Darius and Alana Cole, poised as ever. This time, they weren't guests. They were the benefactors, hosts of the annual Global Leadership and Inclusion Gala, an event dedicated to funding scholarships and opportunities for underrepresented innovators. The crowd looked different too. The old guard had thinned out. New faces filled the room. Leaders, creators, and dreamers who had earned their place through vision, not bloodline. The same journalists who once mocked Alana's gown now stood in line to interview her. The same investors who dismissed Coal Dynamics now called it the most ethical and profitable energy company in America. Darius walked the floor with quiet confidence, shaking hands, exchanging ideas, listening more than he spoke. Across the room, Alana greeted a group of young engineers from underfunded schools, her words calm but inspiring. "Build your legacy with integrity," she told them, "because real legacy can't be bought. It's lived." Near the back of the ballroom, almost invisible in the crowd, sat Sterling Grant. No entourage, no spotlight, just a man in a black suit watching a stage that used to be his. He clapped when the Coles took the podium, though his eyes carried the weight of memory. The night his arrogance turned into a mirror he couldn't face. When Darius stepped to the microphone, the room quieted instantly. His speech wasn't about triumph or revenge. It was about transformation. Last year, this very room witnessed what happens when heritage is confused with entitlement, he said evenly. Tonight, it witnesses something else, what happens when grace meets ignorance and chooses progress over pride. A ripple of emotion moved through the guests. Cameras flashed, not out of scandal this time, but respect. Darius continued, "This isn't about proving who belongs where. It's about building spaces where everyone can belong. Legacy isn't a birthright, it's a responsibility." Applause filled the ballroom, sincere, unified. And as the music swelled again, Sterling lowered his head. For the first time in his life, he clapped not out of habit or performance, but humility. Racism didn't just cost him a deal, it cost him his illusion of superiority. He mistook silence for weakness, composure for surrender, and respect for permission. But history never remembers the mocker. It remembers the ones who stood tall through the noise. As the gala carried on, Alana noticed Sterling near the back. Their eyes met for a brief moment. She offered a polite nod, not of forgiveness, but of finality. A quiet acknowledgement that the chapter had closed. Outside, the city lights glowed against the night sky. The same skyline that once belonged to Sterling's family now bore the name Coal Dynamics on its tallest tower. The empire he mocked had become the standard he could never reach. If you were Darius or Alana, would you have spoken or stayed silent? Have you ever been judged before they knew your name? Would you have stood still or stood tall? Like and subscribe to Echoes of Hope Stories HQ, because silence should never be the end of any story.